Hey, I'm Megan. Welcome to our channel. Now relax and let me tell you a story. I bought my dream house on the coast, only to walk in on my daughter-in-law giving a tour of the property to her parents. "I'll take the master suite, my mom can have the one with the walk-in closet, and you can stay in the shed out back," I heard her say. I waited for them to leave, installed cameras, and what I saw next. I'm glad you're here. Stick around to the end and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far my story has traveled. I'm 62 years old, and I never imagined I'd have to fight for my own home. For 3 decades, I worked the night shift as a nurse at Central General Hospital, saving every penny I could. When I finally retired last year, I had exactly $350,000 put away. It was my escape plan, my ticket to the freedom I'd dreamed of for decades. The house on the Florida coast was perfect. 3 bedrooms, a view of the ocean, and most importantly, it was mine, completely mine. After years of living in a tiny apartment where I could hear my neighbors arguing through the thin walls, I would finally have my sanctuary by the sea. The day I signed the papers, I cried in the parking lot of the title company's office. They weren't tears of sadness, but of pure relief. For the first time in my adult life, no one could take my home from me, or so I thought. My son Michael seemed genuinely happy for me when I told him about the purchase. We'd had our differences over the years, especially after he married Patricia 5 years ago, but I thought this could be a new beginning for us. I told him I hoped he and Patricia would come visit, that they would always be welcome. What I didn't expect was to find them giving a tour of my house as if it were a property for sale. I had driven down from New York City to bring the last of my boxes. It was 3 p.m. on a sunny Tuesday when I saw Michael's car in my driveway. My heart swelled with affection. Maybe they had come to surprise me, to help with the move. I came in through the back door, carrying a heavy box of books, when I heard voices in the living room. It wasn't just Michael and Patricia, there were other people there. I stopped in the hallway, unsure if I should announce my arrival. Then I heard Patricia's voice, clear and authoritarian as always. "This will be my room," she was saying. "It has the best ocean view and the biggest bathroom. Michael and I need the space." My hands tightened around the box. Her room? I walked silently toward the living room, staying hidden behind the hallway wall. "And where will Michael's mother sleep?" asked an older woman's voice I didn't recognize. Patricia laughed, and the sound sent a chill down my spine. "Oh, Celia can stay in the shed out back. We've already cleaned it up a bit. It has electricity and everything. It'll be like her own little apartment." "The shed, in my own house, is perfect for her," an older man's voice added. "At her age, she probably prefers something simpler anyway." I set the box down on the floor with more force than I intended. The sound echoed down the hall, and the voices in the living room abruptly stopped. "Did you hear that?" Michael whispered. "It's probably just the wind," Patricia replied quickly. "This old house makes a lot of noises. It'll be one of the first things we fix when we move in permanently." When we move in. Not when they come to visit. When they move in. I picked up the box and retreated silently to the back door. I needed time to process what I had just heard. I slipped out of the house and walked around the perimeter until I reached the shed Patricia had so casually mentioned. It was a small, rundown structure I had planned to turn into an art studio one day. There was a grimy window that barely let in any light. When I opened the door, the smell of mildew hit me like a slap. The concrete floor was cracked, and there were spider webs in every corner. This was where my daughter-in-law thought I should live, on my own property. I went back into the house, this time making enough noise to announce my presence. The voices immediately fell silent. "Hello, is anyone here?" I called out from the kitchen. Michael appeared first, a smile on his face that didn't reach his eyes. "Mom, we didn't know you were coming today." "It's my house, Michael. I don't need to make an appointment," I replied. Patricia emerged behind him, followed by an older couple I assumed were her parents. I had met them briefly at the wedding, but hadn't had much interaction since. "Celia," Patricia said with that practiced fake smile she had perfected. "What a pleasant surprise. We were just showing my parents your lovely new house." My lovely new home, I corrected automatically, watching her smile twitch slightly. Of course, she replied, but something in her eyes told me she didn't agree. Patricia's parents introduced themselves as Robert and Lucy. They were polite but distant, treating me as if I were a guest in my own living room. Patricia was just telling us about the plans you all have for this place, Lucy said. It sounds very exciting. What plans? I asked, looking directly at Michael. He shifted uncomfortably. We were just talking about future possibilities, Mom. You know, for when you come to visit and all. Visit? This is my house. I live here. The silence that followed was deafening. I could see Robert and Lucy exchange glances, clearly uncomfortable with the sudden tension in the room. Well, Robert said finally, I think we should be going. Thanks for the tour, Patricia. After they left, the real conversation began. Mom, we need to talk, Michael said. But it was Patricia who took control. Celia, I know this transition might be difficult for you, but you need to be realistic about your situation. My situation? You're an older woman, living alone in a huge house by the sea. Wouldn't it be safer if Michael and I were here to look after you? The word look after sounded more like a threat than an offer of help. I don't need to be looked after, I answered firmly. I am perfectly capable of taking care of my own home. Of course you are, Michael said quickly. But Mom, think about it. We could handle the maintenance, the bills, all of it. You could just relax and enjoy your retirement. It was the same voice he used as a child when he wanted something he knew he shouldn't have. And the shed would be perfect for you, Patricia added. Total privacy, without the noise from the main house when we have guests. That night, after they left, I sat on my new porch, looking out at the ocean. The waves crashed against the sand in a steady rhythm that should have been calming, but my mind was racing. It wasn't just about the room or the shed, it was about the tone in Patricia's voice, the way she talked about fixing things in the house, as if it were already hers. It was about how Michael had avoided my gaze during the entire conversation. Something was terribly wrong, and I had a feeling that what I'd heard today was just the tip of the iceberg. The next day, I drove to the electronics store at the nearest mall. The young man at the counter couldn't hide his surprise when I explained what I needed. Ma'am, are you sure you want a system this comprehensive? He asked, reviewing the list I had written. It's 6 cameras with high-definition recording, plus the remote monitoring system. This all costs close to $800. I'm completely sure, I replied, taking out my credit card. I also need it to be discreet. Very discreet. Tyler, according to his name tag, was maybe 25 and had the patience of a saint. He spent 2 hours explaining how everything worked, how to access the recordings from my phone, how to adjust the angles, even how to get alerts when they detected motion. You don't want someone to come and install it for you? He asked as he loaded the boxes into my car. No, I can handle it myself. I couldn't risk anyone else knowing about the cameras. Some instinct told me this needed to be my secret, at least for now. The installation took me the entire next day. It wasn't as complicated as I had feared, but my 62-year-old hands weren't as nimble as they used to be. I placed one camera in the living room, another in the kitchen, one in my bedroom, one in the room Patricia had claimed as hers, one in the main hallway, and the last one outside, focused on the entrance to the shed. Every time I felt a flicker of doubt about what I was doing, I remembered Patricia's laugh when she mentioned the shed. The sound still sent shivers down my spine. For 3 days, the cameras captured nothing but me moving through my own house, feeling strangely paranoid. I started to wonder if I had overreacted. Maybe Patricia was just fantasizing out loud. Maybe Michael really did just want to help. Then Friday came. I was at the grocery store when my phone buzzed with a motion alert. It was 1:30 p.m. I pulled up the app and saw Patricia letting herself in the front door with her own set of keys. Michael wasn't with her. My pulse quickened. How did she get keys to my house? I watched her move through the living room, but she didn't seem to be checking anything in particular. Then she went to the kitchen, where she opened several cabinets and took pictures with her phone. Pictures of my cabinets. Then she did something that made my blood run cold. She went straight into my bedroom. The camera showed her opening my drawers, rummaging through my closet, even lifting my mattress as if she were looking for something. She took more pictures, lots of them. Next, she went into the room she had claimed as hers and started measuring the windows with a tape measure she'd brought. She took detailed notes in a notebook, measuring every wall, every space. But what truly alarmed me was when she went out into the backyard and started walking around the shed, taking pictures from every angle. She pressed her face against the windows, trying to peer inside. Then she took more notes. This wasn't just curiosity. It was planning. I drove home as fast as I could, but by the time I arrived, Patricia was gone. There was no evidence she had been there, except for the recordings on my phone. That night, I reviewed every minute of the footage. Patricia had been in my house for nearly 2 hours, documenting every corner as if she were taking inventory. But for what? The answer came on Sunday. This time, the motion alert came at 10 a.m. But it wasn't just Patricia. There were 3 people with her parents, and an older man I didn't recognize. I watched them on my phone from church, where I had gone trying to maintain some sense of normalcy in my life. What I saw made me walk out in the middle of the sermon. Patricia was giving a full tour of the house, but not like the time before with her parents. This time, she was speaking to the unknown man as if he were a professional of some kind. He took notes as she spoke and occasionally pointed to different areas of the house. I couldn't hear what they were saying through the cameras, but their body language was clear. This was some sort of consultation. When they got to the backyard, Patricia led the man directly to the shed. She unlocked the door with a key I definitely hadn't given her, and the 3 of them went inside. The man spent several minutes examining the space, taking measurements and testing the electrical outlets. Then he pulled out a tablet and started showing something to Patricia on the screen. My hands were shaking so much I almost dropped my phone. When they finally left, 2 hours later, I sat in the church parking lot, trying to process what I had seen. These weren't casual visits. Patricia had keys to my house and was using them freely when she knew I wouldn't be there. But the most disturbing part was the systematic nature of it all. The photos, the measurements, the notes, and now this meeting with an unknown professional. This wasn't impulsive. It was a plan. That evening, Michael called me. "Hi, Mom. How was your weekend?" "Quiet," I lied. "And yours?" "Oh, you know, the usual. Patricia and I have been talking more about your situation." There was that word again. My situation. "What kind of talks?" "Just preliminary ideas, Mom. But we wanted to ask if you'd be open to making some changes that could benefit everyone." My stomach sank. "What kind of changes?" "Michael, this is my house. I bought it with my own money. It's in my name, and I plan to live here." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Of course, Mom. We just want to make sure you're comfortable and safe." After I hung up, I sat on my porch again, but this time, the sound of the ocean brought no comfort. Michael's words replayed in my mind. Changes that could benefit everyone. Everyone, or just them? I reviewed the recordings one more time, pausing on the image of the unknown man taking measurements in my shed. Who was he, and what kind of changes were they planning exactly? One thing was certain, I needed more information before it was too late. The answer about the mystery man's identity came sooner than I expected, and it was worse than I ever could have imagined. On Tuesday morning, as I was watering the plants in my front yard, I saw an unfamiliar car pull up in front of my house. It was a sleek black sedan, the kind professionals drive. My heart started to beat faster when I recognized the driver. It was the same man who had been measuring my shed on Sunday. I pretended to stay busy with my plants as he got out of the car and walked toward my door. He was a man in his 50s, dressed in an expensive suit and carrying a leather briefcase. Everything about him screamed lawyer or accountant. He rang the doorbell 3 times before I decided to answer. "Mrs. Rocha?" he asked when I opened the door. "Yes, how can I help you?" "My name is Richard Stevens. I'm an accountant. Your daughter-in-law, Patricia, contacted me about some financial matters related to this property." I kept my expression neutral, though inside I was screaming. I'm not sure what you're talking about, Mr. Stevens. I haven't requested any accounting services. He frowned, consulting some notes in his legal pad. That's strange. Mrs. Patricia told me that you were interested in exploring options to convert part of your property into a seasonal rental unit, specifically the back building. Mr. Stevens, I replied carefully, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I have no interest in renting out any part of my property. Richard Stevens looked genuinely confused now. But Mrs. Patricia showed me the property last Sunday. She said you had authorized her to explore the financial options and that you were too busy to meet with me personally. The chill I felt had nothing to do with the ocean breeze. What kind of financial options? Well, according to her numbers, you could generate between $1,200 and $1,500 a week renting out the back unit during peak season. That would be about $15,000 over the 3 summer months. Quite lucrative considering the beachfront location. My mind was working quickly. And what else did Mrs. Patricia tell you? She explained that you were considering moving into the smaller unit yourself to maximize the rental income from the main house. Very smart, really. A lot of older homeowners are making similar arrangements to supplement their retirement income. There it was. The entire plan, laid bare by an accountant who thought he was helping an entrepreneurial grandmother. Mr. Stevens, I said slowly, I think Mrs. Patricia has misled you. She has no authority to make decisions about my property, and I am definitely not interested in moving into my shed. His face went pale. Oh my God. Are you saying she had no right to contact me? That's exactly what I'm saying. After Richard Stevens apologized profusely and left, I sat in my kitchen, trembling. It wasn't just anger I felt, but a betrayal so deep it physically hurt. Patricia had not only planned to take over my house, but she had started putting that plan into motion, using professionals to legitimize her scheme. But what role was Michael playing in all of this? The answer came that very afternoon. I was in my room when the motion alert chimed on my phone. This time it was Michael and Patricia together, letting themselves in the front door as if they owned the place. I hid in my closet with my phone, watching the live feed as they settled into my living room. Did you talk to Richard today? I heard Michael ask. Yes, but there was a problem, Patricia replied. Your mother told him I had no authorization to contact him. Damn it. Do you think she suspects something? I don't know, but we need to speed things up. We can't risk her finding out the full plan before it's ready. Michael sighed audibly. I still feel uncomfortable about all this, Patricia. Really? Are we going to have this conversation again? Patricia's voice turned cold. Michael, your mother is sitting on a gold mine here. This property is worth at least $600,000, and she's wasting its potential, living here alone like a hermit. But it's her house, Patricia. She worked her whole life to buy it. And we've worked our whole lives, too. What do we have to show for it? A rented apartment and jobs that barely pay the bills. Meanwhile, she's here all alone in this beachfront mansion. It's not a mansion. That's not the point. Patricia's voice rose. The point is, we need to think about our future, about our children's future when we have them. Your mother isn't going to live forever, Michael. Wouldn't you rather we benefit from this property now, when we can all enjoy it instead of waiting until she dies? A long silence followed. When Michael finally spoke, his voice sounded defeated. And what if she doesn't cooperate? Then we'll have to get more creative. I already spoke to my cousin Julia, the one who works in social services. She says there are ways to prove that an older person can no longer live safely and independently. My blood ran cold. Social services? What kind of ways? Documenting incidents of confusion, forgetfulness, questionable financial decisions. Julia says if we can establish a pattern of cognitive decline, we could petition for a competency evaluation. Patricia, that sounds like protecting your mother from herself? Michael, look at her objectively. She bought an expensive house without consulting anyone. She moved here all by herself without a real plan for maintenance or security. Aren't those signs of deteriorating judgment? Those are signs of independence. Call it what you want. But Julia says if we can document enough incidents of poor judgment, we could obtain guardianship. Temporarily, of course, just until we can ensure she's living in a safer, more age-appropriate environment. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped my phone. They were talking about having me declared incompetent, about stripping me of my legal ability to make my own decisions. "And where would she live?" Michael asked in a small voice. "Well, after all the research I've done, I think the shed really would be perfect for her. With a few minor renovations, of course, we could turn it into a small but comfortable apartment. She'd have her privacy, but we'd be right here to supervise her. And the main house would become our family home, obviously, and as we discussed, we could rent out rooms during the high season to generate extra income. It's a win-win situation, Michael. Your mother gets care and supervision, we get a home and a source of income, and the property is used to its full potential." There was a twisted logic to their plan that made me nauseous. They had thought of everything, even how to make it look like they were doing me a favor. "How long would all this take?" Michael asked. "Julia says if we start documenting incidents now, we could have a solid case in 3 to 6 months, especially if we can show she's making irrational or dangerous financial decisions." "Like what?" "Well, for example, she spent almost her entire retirement fund on this house. That could be interpreted as financial recklessness, especially for someone on a fixed income." It was my money, my life savings, my decision. There's also the fact that she's living alone in a beach property, which is inherently risky for an older person. Hurricanes, intruders, medical emergencies with no one around to help. Every point Patricia made was another nail in the coffin of my independence. I could see exactly how they would present their case. Celia Rocha, 62-year-old woman, making rash decisions, living dangerously, in need of protection from her own recklessness. "I need time to think about this," Michael said finally. "We don't have much time, Michael. The longer we wait, the more chances she has to do something that complicates our plans. We already had the incident with Richard today." I know. It's just a lot." "It's our future," Patricia said firmly. "And I'm not going to let it slip away because of some misplaced guilt." They left 20 minutes later, leaving me sitting in my closet in complete shock. They didn't just want my house. They wanted to destroy my mental competence to get it, and the most terrifying part of all was that they had a specific plan to do it. The following days were a nightmare of constant vigilance. Every time my phone rang, every time I heard a car in the driveway, my heart raced. I knew Patricia and Michael would be back, and that when they did, they would begin to implement their plan to destroy my mental credibility. I didn't have to wait long. On Friday morning, while I was in the garden pruning my roses, a familiar car pulled into my driveway. It was Michael, but he wasn't alone. There was a middle-aged woman with him whom I didn't recognize, and they were carrying clipboards and documents. "Mom!" Michael greeted me with a smile that seemed overly bright. "I brought someone I want you to meet." The woman was thin, with short brown hair and a professional smile that immediately put me on alert. She wore a navy blue blazer and had an ID badge hanging from her neck. "Mrs. Rocha, I'm Julia Price, a social worker with the county. Your son was concerned about you and asked me to come by for a wellness check." There she was, Patricia's cousin, just as they had planned. "I don't need a wellness check," I replied calmly, though inside I was furious. "I'm perfectly fine." "Of course you are," Julia said in that condescending voice she probably used with all older adults. "These are just routine visits to ensure our senior residents have all the resources they need." Michael interjected quickly. "Mom, they're just trying to help. Can we come inside and talk?" I had no choice without seeming suspicious or combative. I led them into the living room, where Julia immediately began taking notes on everything she saw. "This is a lovely home," she commented, but her eyes were cataloging every detail. "How long have you been living here?" 3 weeks? And before that?" "In an apartment in New York City." "And what motivated you to move here?" It was a seemingly innocent question, but I could see where she was going. I wanted to live by the sea in my retirement. I understand. And did you discuss this decision with your family? Michael shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Mom, there's nothing wrong with you buying the house. Julia just wants to understand your situation. My situation? Julia intervened smoothly. We just want to make sure you have all the support you need to live independently here. Do you have any friends in the area? Do you know your neighbors? I just moved in. I'm getting to know people gradually, of course. And in terms of medical care, have you established relationships with local doctors yet? Each question was like a small trap. If I said I hadn't found doctors yet, I would sound irresponsible. If I said I had, they would ask for specific details I didn't have. I'm in the process of transferring my medical records. Julia jotted something down. And financially, do you feel comfortable with the costs of maintaining a property of this size? Very comfortable. Excellent. Michael mentioned you used a significant portion of your retirement savings for the purchase. Does that not concern you in terms of future financial security? There it was. The first bombshell. Michael had been feeding her information about my finances. My finances are my business, I replied firmly. Of course they are, Julia said quickly. We just want to ensure you have access to resources should you need them in the future. The visit continued for another 45 minutes, with Julia asking seemingly innocent questions about my daily routine, my plans for emergencies, my social support network. Michael would occasionally add comments that supposedly supported me, but in reality fueled Julia's concerns. Mom has always been very independent, he'd say, sometimes to the point of being stubborn about accepting help. Or, she's used to doing things her way, even when it's not the most practical decision. After they left, I sat in my kitchen, trembling with rage. They had not only started their documentation campaign, but Michael was actively participating in it. My own son was helping to build a case against me. But that wasn't the only visit of the week. On Monday, another unfamiliar car pulled into my driveway. This time, it was an older man who introduced himself as Dr. Charles Gibson, a geriatrician. Dr. Gibson? I was confused. I don't have an appointment with you. Your daughter-in-law, Patricia, contacted me. She said she was concerned about some changes in your behavior and thought you might benefit from an evaluation. My stomach sank. What kind of changes? Well, according to her notes, there have been some incidents of confusion, questionable financial decisions, and a growing tendency toward social isolation. Every accusation was a carefully constructed lie. I have had no incidents of confusion, I said firmly. Of course, these are just family concerns, very common when there are major life transitions, like moving to a new area. Dr. Gibson was more subtle than Julia, but just as dangerous. His questions seemed conversational, but he was assessing my mental state with every answer. What year is it? 2025. And who is the president? I answered all his basic orientation questions correctly, but I could see he was making notes about my level of cooperation, my attitude toward the evaluation, my insight into my own situation. Have you noticed any changes in your memory lately? No. And your family? Have they noticed any changes? You would have to ask them. He jotted down something about defensiveness and lack of insight. Can you tell me about your decision to buy this house? It was another trap. If I sounded too impulsive, it would seem like an irrational decision. If I sounded too calculated, I might seem obsessive. I wanted to live by the sea in my retirement. I saved money for years to be able to do it. And did you discuss this decision with your family? It is my money and my decision. More notes about defensiveness and isolation from family input. After Dr. Gibson left, I called my own doctor in New York. Dr. Paula Resende had been my physician for 15 years. Celia, how are you? How's life on the coast? Paula, I need your help. Someone is trying to have me declared mentally incompetent. I explained the entire situation. Dr. Paula listened in silence, occasionally making sounds of understanding or disgust. "Celia, this sounds like elder financial abuse," she said. "Have you considered contacting a lawyer?" "They haven't done anything legally yet. They're just building a case." "Well, I can help you on the medical front. I'm going to email you a complete cognitive assessment you took 6 months ago as part of your retirement physical. The results were perfectly normal. I'll also document your current mental state during this call." It was a relief to know I had at least one medical ally, but I knew Patricia and Michael wouldn't stop there. I wasn't wrong. On Wednesday, I received a call from my bank. "Mrs. Rocha, we have a question about recent activity on your account." My heart stopped. "What kind of activity?" "We received an inquiry from someone claiming to be your son, asking about the status of your account and recent transactions, specifically regarding the purchase of your home." "And did you give him any information?" "No, of course not, but they wanted to confirm if you had authorized anyone to access your account information." "Absolutely not." "Perfect. We just wanted to check. We also wanted to inform you that the individual mentioned concerns about your ability to manage your finances and asked about our protocols for reporting suspicious financial activity by elderly clients." The audacity left me speechless. Michael had gone to the bank, trying to sow doubt about my financial competence. "Is there anything else I should know?" I asked. "Well, he also asked about the process for obtaining power of attorney over the accounts of clients who might be experiencing cognitive decline." There it was, the end goal of their entire plan: power of attorney, total control over my finances. That night, as I reviewed the camera footage from the past few days, I saw something that made me sick. During one of the visits I hadn't noticed in real time, Patricia had brought a small camera and had filmed every room in my house, focusing especially on anything that looked messy or uncared for. She was documenting evidence of my supposed inability to maintain my home. It was time to fight back, but first I needed more evidence of their activities, because it was one thing to know what they were planning, and another thing entirely to be able to prove it. For the next 2 weeks, the cat-and-mouse game continued. Patricia and Michael kept up their unannounced visits, each one accompanied by different professionals who were supposedly there to help. A nutritionist who assessed my kitchen and expressed concern about my inadequate nutrition based on what she found in my fridge. A physical therapist who noted my mobility issues after I casually mentioned my back was sore from all the gardening work. Every visit was meticulously documented. Every interaction was designed to create evidence of my supposed incompetence, but I was documenting everything too. The cameras captured every visit, every whispered conversation between Patricia and Michael when they thought I couldn't hear them, every moment they coordinated their stories. It was during one of those recordings that I heard something that changed everything. It was a Thursday afternoon when Michael and Patricia arrived with someone new. A man in a suit who introduced himself as Paul Fisher, an attorney specializing in elder law. "Mrs. Rocha," Fisher said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "your family is concerned about your well-being and has requested my consultation on some legal options that could protect you." "I don't need legal protection," I replied firmly. "Of course, no one is suggesting you do. But as a preventative measure, your son and daughter-in-law have been exploring the possibility of establishing a trust for your assets, with them as the trustees. This would ensure your finances are protected and well managed. A trust, with them as trustees. In other words, total control over my money while I was still alive." "I'm not interested," I said clearly. Fisher exchanged a look with Michael. "I understand your reservations, but considering some of the reports I've received about recent financial decisions that could be considered unwise." "What reports? From whom?" "The purchase of this property, for example. Using nearly all of your retirement savings on a single investment is generally considered financially imprudent for someone on a fixed income." Michael leaned forward. "Mom, we're just trying to protect you. If something happened to you, if you needed long-term care, you'd have no resources available. Health insurance doesn't cover everything." Patricia chimed in. The costs of long-term care can be devastating. If you had to sell this house in an emergency, you could lose money if the market is down. Fisher nodded gravely. Which is exactly why a trust would be beneficial. Your assets would be protected, yet you would still have access to the income for your daily needs. Under your supervision, I added. Under professional administration, Fisher corrected. Of course, as the beneficiary of the trust, you would have rights and protections. I knew exactly what kind of rights I'd have, the right to ask their permission to access my own money. I'm not signing anything today, I said finally. Of course not, Fisher said quickly. These are important decisions that require consideration, but I would suggest you don't wait too long. The benefits of proactive planning are significant. After they left, I sat in my kitchen feeling defeated. Their plan was brilliant in its simplicity. Use legitimate professionals to make their actions seem responsible and necessary. Who would question an elder law attorney recommending financial protections for an older woman? But then something clicked in my mind. They had made a mistake. If they were going to document everything officially, then so would I. And I had something they didn't know I had. Video evidence of their entire plan. I spent the rest of the weekend preparing. I contacted a lawyer of my own, someone completely independent of the ones Patricia and Michael had brought. I called him Carlos and sent him copies of all the recordings, explaining the entire situation. Celia, he told me, this is a classic case of elder financial abuse. The fact that you have their entire plan on tape is extraordinary, but we need to be very careful about how we handle this. What do you recommend? Let them proceed with the evaluation on Tuesday. Cooperate completely. Be the sanest, most competent person you have ever been. In the meantime, I'll be preparing a legal response that includes all of your evidence, and then we will confront them with the truth, all of it. Tuesday came all too soon. Julia Price showed up at 10 a.m. sharp, accompanied by an assistant who carried a tablet to document the evaluation. For 2 hours, they inspected every inch of my house, checked my fridge, my medications, my clothes. They asked questions about my daily routine, my finances, my social relationships. Have you noticed any changes in your memory lately? Julia asked. No. Your family has expressed concerns about your well-being. Yes, but I believe their concerns are unfounded. Can you explain why you spent the bulk of your retirement savings on this property? It was the same question everyone else had asked, phrased in the same way, designed to make my decision sound irrational. Because I wanted to live by the sea in my retirement, and I had enough money to do so comfortably. Did you consider the long-term financial implications? Of course. I have a stable retirement income and reduced expenses. The decision was financially sound. After they finished, Julia sat down with me in my living room. Mrs. Rocha, based on what I've observed today, I see no immediate evidence of self-neglect or severe cognitive impairment. However, some of your recent decisions do raise questions about your judgment. What kind of questions? The decision to move here without establishing a local support network, the significant expenditure of your savings, the apparent resistance to family input in your financial decisions. These could be signs of social isolation and deteriorating judgment. It was unbelievable. They had twisted my independence into a pathology. I am going to recommend follow-up evaluations, Julia continued, a full neuropsychological assessment and a financial consultation with a certified planner. And if those assessments show I am perfectly competent, then we will close the case. But, Mrs. Rocha, I hope you will seriously consider your family's concerns. They often see things that we can't detect in a single visit. After they left, I called Carlos. How did it go? He asked. Exactly as we expected. They're going to order more evaluations, but I think it's time we show our hand. I agree. I have prepared a formal letter to Michael and Patricia, along with copies of all the video evidence. We give them 48 hours to cease and desist all of their activities, or we file formal charges. Charges? For what? Fraud. conspiracy to commit elder financial abuse, filing false reports with government agencies. With the evidence you have, we could send them to prison." It was time for Patricia and Michael to learn that they had severely underestimated their victim. But before Carlos sent the letter, I wanted one final confrontation. I wanted to see their faces when they realized I had known their entire plan from the very beginning. I told Michael I needed to talk to him and Patricia about something important, that they should come over on Friday night for a serious family discussion. He had no idea how serious it would truly be. Friday night arrived with a thunderstorm that sent waves crashing violently against the shore. It was fitting, considering the storm I was about to unleash in my own living room. Michael and Patricia arrived at 7 p.m. sharp, just as I'd asked. They both looked tense, probably wondering if I had found out something about their activities. Patricia was carrying a small recorder in her purse, no doubt planning to document anything she could use against me. "Hi, Mom," Michael greeted me with a kiss on the cheek, with the same phoniness he'd perfected over the past few weeks. "What did you want to talk about?" "Sit down," I said calmly, gesturing to the sofa. "We have a lot to discuss." I sat across from them in my favorite armchair with my tablet in my lap. It had been 2 months since I'd installed the cameras, and I had over 50 hours of video evidence of their activities. "Before we begin," I said, "I want you both to know that everything we discuss tonight is being recorded." Patricia sat up straight immediately. "Recorded? Why?" "To protect myself. I've been having some trouble with my memory lately." I lied deliberately, watching their eyes light up with interest. "My doctor says it's important to document important conversations." It was the perfect trap. If they protested the recording, they would look like they were hiding something. If they didn't, anything they said would be on the record. "Of course," Michael said quickly. "We completely understand." "Excellent. Now, I want to talk about some concerns I've been having about your behavior over the last few weeks." Patricia frowned. "Our behavior?" "Yes. You see, I've noticed you've been bringing a lot of different professionals to my home. Social workers, doctors, lawyers, accountants, all with similar stories about being concerned for my well-being." Michael shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, we were just trying to help." "I know, Michael, and I appreciate your concern, but it's made me think about my situation here." I held up the tablet, pretending to consult some notes. In reality, I was opening the camera app. "I've decided that maybe you're right about this house being too much for me." I saw them exchange a quick, hopeful glance. "Really?" Patricia asked, trying to keep her voice neutral. "Yes, I've been thinking about your suggestions regarding the shed out back. It could be a viable solution." They were now struggling to contain their excitement. "Mom, that's so wise of you," Michael said. "I think you could be really happy back there, and we'd be right here to help you with anything you needed." "Exactly," Patricia added. "And we could take care of all the maintenance on the main house, the finances, all that stressful stuff." "Speaking of finances," I said casually, "Mr. Fisher mentioned something about a trust." "Yes," Patricia said eagerly. "It would be the perfect way to protect your assets while ensuring you have everything you need." "With you as the trustees?" "Well, yes. We're family, Celia. Who else could you trust?" I smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. "That's an interesting question, Patricia. Who can I trust?" I tapped the screen of the tablet, and the video recording began to play on the large screen TV I had connected earlier. Their own voices filled the room. "Then we'll have to get more creative." I already spoke to my cousin Julia, the one who works in social services. She says there are ways to prove that an older person can no longer live safely and independently. The blood drained from both of their faces. "What is this?" Michael whispered. "This," I said calmly, "is a recording of the two of you plotting to have me declared mentally incompetent so you can steal my house." The recording continued, showing their discussions about documenting incidents of confusion, about using social services to build a case against me, about twisting my independence into evidence of mental decline. "Mom, I can explain," Michael started, but I held up a hand to silence him. "Let me continue. There's more." I switched to the recording of Patricia giving the tour to the accountant, talking about converting my home into a rental property while relegating me to the shed. Then, the video of them discussing forcing me to sign over power of attorney. By the time I was done showing the most damning evidence, Patricia was crying, and Michael looked like he was about to be sick. "Mom, I am so sorry," Michael said, his voice breaking. "I never wanted it to get to this point." "But it did get to this point, didn't it?" I replied. "Involving social services, bringing in doctors to evaluate me, filing false reports about my mental state. Do you know that filing false reports with government agencies is a serious crime?" Patricia finally found her voice. "Celia, you have to understand. We were just worried about you." "Worried?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Patricia, on one of these recordings, you literally said that I'm not going to live forever, and that you wanted to benefit from my property now, instead of waiting until I die." She went even paler. "I have over 50 hours of video evidence," I continued. "Your complete plans to have me declared incompetent, steal my house, and control my finances, all documented in high definition." Michael leaned forward, his head in his hands. "What are you going to do?" "That's an excellent question, Michael. My lawyer believes I have a solid case for criminal charges: fraud, conspiracy to commit elder financial abuse, filing false reports. He's fairly certain you could both face prison time." Patricia began to sob for real. "Please, Celia. We have jobs, reputations. This would ruin us." "Like you tried to ruin me?" I stood up and walked to the window, watching the storm outside. The waves were huge, crashing against the sand with a force I could feel through the glass. "However," I said, turning back to them, "I am willing to make a deal." They both looked at me with desperate hope. "You will never contact me again. You will never set foot on my property again. You will contact every single professional you brought here, and you will retract every concern you ever expressed about my mental well-being. You will do this immediately, and provide me with documentation of those retractions." Michael nodded vigorously. "Yes, of course." "Furthermore," I continued, "you will return the keys to my house that you somehow obtained without my permission." Patricia fumbled in her purse and pulled out a set of keys, placing them on the coffee table with a trembling hand. "And then?" Michael asked. "Then I will never see you again. We will consider this matter closed, as long as you meet all of my conditions." "And if we don't?" Patricia asked in a small voice. "Then my lawyer files the criminal charges immediately. And trust me, after everything you've done, I will have no qualms about sending you to prison." They left that night in the storm, defeated and broken. Michael turned once as he reached the car, as if he was going to say something, but Patricia pushed him inside, and they drove away. Over the next 2 weeks, they met every one of my conditions. Dr. Gibson called to apologize for the misunderstanding about my evaluation. Julia Price at Social Services received a formal retraction of all previously expressed concerns. The attorney, Paul Fisher, was informed his services were no longer needed. A lovely social worker from the Department of Elder Services called to inform me that all complaints against me had been withdrawn by the filing parties. "It's unusual," she told me, "but when family members retract their concerns and claim it was a misunderstanding, we generally close the case." "I understand completely," I replied. A month later, I was sitting on my porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sunrise over the ocean. The peace I felt was unlike anything I had ever experienced before. It wasn't just the absence of a threat, it was the presence of true freedom. I had protected my home, my independence, and my dignity. But more than that, I had proven something that Patricia and Michael never understood: that age does not equal vulnerability, and that underestimating an older woman is an expensive mistake. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was a number I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Rocha, this is Eleanor Martin from the local community center. We heard you were new to the area and wanted to invite you to our book club. We meet every Thursday morning." I smiled, looking out at the ocean that stretched endlessly before me. I would love that, Eleanor. What time? After I hung up, I thought of Michael. Somewhere deep in my heart, there was still pain for the loss of my son. But he had chosen Patricia over his own mother. He had chosen greed over love and manipulation over honesty. Those were his choices, and now he would have to live with the consequences. As for me, I was living with the rewards of my own choices, the courage to buy this house, the wisdom to trust my instincts, and the strength to fight for what was mine. As the sun rose completely over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I took a sip of my coffee and smiled. At 62 years old, I had finally learned life's most important lesson, that real freedom comes not from being loved by others, but from respecting yourself enough to never let anyone take what you've earned. The ocean stretched out before me, vast and full of possibilities, just like my future. For more stories of justice and empowerment, make sure to subscribe to Velvet Vendetta.